This is GCSE Bite-Size Revision, Unit 1, Peace and War, International Relations, and obviously we're doing Sections 4, 5 and 6. Sections 1, 2 and 3, don't even go there. So Section 6, How did the Cold War end? Is divided into 4 topics, the first of which is the beginning of Detente. So we've got Ali G to help us revise Detente, and get ready for a really bad accent. Here we go. USA and USSR become familiar, nuclear hot ash cools down for a bit, but SALT II never reached by Christmas 79. Yes, I told you it was going to be bad. It was almost going Cockney. Anyway, the point of this is, it contains, if you learn it, mnemonics and ideas linked to the issue of Detente. And how we've split this up below, you can see, is into causes, features and effects, so into 3 sections, and that's how I'm going to go through it with you, and you'll be able to see how the bits in red of the whole mnemonic link and what they actually mean. So if you learn what Ali G says, you'll be okay. And what better way to start peacefully with a poem. So here's a poem to explain the background to Detente, the reasons why they were searching for peace. After Cuba's superpowers scared of their role, arms race, space race, rocketing out of control. Too much spending, Vietnam War needed ending, a period of peace or Detente was the goal. Now it's not going to be a bestseller, but this poem should also help with revision. If you're watching this the second time, try and remember what each line means, pause the clip and go through it. If you're watching it the first time, I'm going to tell you. So, line 1 is referring to the fact that Cuba gave the superpowers, the USA and the USSR, a bit of a fright. They realised a nuclear war was possible. The second line refers to what actually it says, which is the fact things were getting stupid. Arms race, space race, too much money, too competitive, totally out of control. Linking to line 3, too much spending really refers to Russia. Russia can't really afford to be doing this, and they need to have an excuse to stop. Line 4 refers to the USA's problem, the fact that they're caught up in another conflict to do with communism, which is the Vietnam War. The USA was supporting the capitalist South against the communist North, and they were drained by this, with their resources and also their principles. And line 5 refers to Detente, what it actually means, which is a period of peace. Any time that you write the word Detente, it's good to give the definition. So causes of Detente is the first bit we're going to look at. And what we mean by that is, why would Detente benefit both sides? What is each side, superpower, which is ideologically opposed to one another, going to get out of making peace? And this is where Ali G comes in. The USA and USSR become familiar. It's the FAM bit that we're interested in. So it stands for food. The USSR wanted to ensure they still could get food. Alliances. Both sides saw a key advantage to making an alliance. And money, particularly for the USSR, because they, as we said before, they were running out. So the food situation, just to remember that the USSR was very susceptible to famine and therefore really relied on grain import from the USA to ensure they didn't starve. So this is very important. The alliances part, well, here is a picture of Brezhnev and Nixon looking very friendly, but what they're really thinking is as follows. Nixon's thinking, maybe Brezhnev will help me make an ally to end the Vietnam War. Because Nixon was fighting a war against communist North Vietnam to try and stop communism from spreading. And he was getting, at this stage, in the 70s, to a point where he was draining all the resources of America. His own people found it very peculiar that he was sending so many soldiers across. There's loads of protests going on in America. So he really needs and has pressure on him to end the Vietnam War. And he can't do this very easily because North Vietnam is communist and the leader isn't interested. So he thinks if he can make an ally out of Brezhnev, who is the communist leader of Russia, perhaps he can make an ally out of the communist North Vietnam. Similarly, Brezhnev is thinking, well, what can I get out of this? He knows full well what Nixon will want to use him for, and he's thinking, well, maybe if I help Nixon, then he'll stop making plans to ally China. because Nixon had also gone to visit China, the first time ever for a US president to go and visit China in 1972. And this was worrying for Brezhnev because communist China was a emergent communist superpower, and it would be quite threatening if Russia was not involved in this alliance. So he wants to involve them. And of course, as we said, the final reason, money, well, the USSR was really poor and they also lacked knowledge. So the second section of détente is the features or key features of détente. Note I'm using those words because an exam question might ask you for the key features. Well, the first thing to remember is that progress was made in 3 areas. So peace was formed by arms limitation, i.e. preventing the amount of weapons that were around, nuclear weapons, cooperation, to actually make gestures to each other that they were going to work together, and human rights, to think about the quality of life in all countries, particularly concerns in communist countries. So the events and the agreements that go under the features of détente is the bit from the Ali Jinnah monarch, nuclear hot ash cools down for a bit. So nuclear stands for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, hot stands for 3 agreements, which is the Hotline, the Outer Space Treaty and the Test Ban Treaty, and ASH stands for 3 agreements or areas of progress, the Apollo-Soyuz mission, SALT 1 and Helsinki agreements. And we're going to go through each one of these in turn, some in more detail than others. So we're now going to look at actual features of détente as signified by part of the mnemonic nuclear hot. So we're going to do it in chronological order. The hotline is first, and this was set up in 1963 following the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was literally a telephone. This is literally it. The picture shows it. A red telephone with a button in the middle, and it goes between Moscow, the capital of the USSR, and Washington, the capital of the USA, to encourage talking between the 2 leaders. This may seem like a very simplistic system. However, it was really, really important to speed up communications between the 2 superpowers to avoid crises happening like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Do remember that in the Cuban Missile Crisis they were communicating by letter. Before that, they'd been communicating by telegram, and this obviously leads to misinterpretations as well as really precious time, being taken away. The Test Ban Treaty was also signed in the same year, and this was to stop nuclear testing on land. And this was really important in terms of a gesture to really show a willingness to start thinking about the issue of the development of nuclear weapons. Next was the Outer Space Treaty, agreed in 1967, and this really linked to the space race and the fact it was getting out of control. And it was trying to point out that space should be for scientific purposes, not to do with war, and it was to prevent nuclear weapons being launched from or through space. So space was out of bounds. And the last one was the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was agreed in 1968. It is a bit of a mouthful. It's the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, if I say it properly. And what that literally means is nuclear stop making more of treaty. So that's what proliferation means. So it means that the USA and the USSR won't make any more nuclear weapons to give to other countries. And as the sign shows on the right hand side, it's so that there will definitely be a guarantee that in the world there are some nuclear free zones and nuclear weapons won't spread and get out of control. The ASH bit of the mnemonic stands for the Apollo-Soyuz mission, SALT 1 and Helsinki agreement. So this is really more about cooperation and kind of international issues like human rights. Now again, I'm going to switch things around a bit so that it's in chronological order. So really, rather than ASH, we could really say it's SA. So SALT 1 first in 1972, the Apollo-Soyuz mission in 1975, and the Helsinki agreements in 1975. So SALT 1 stands for Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, and this was signed in 1972 between the USA and the USSR. And as you can see, Brezhnev and Nixon, the 2 leaders of the 2 superpowers, are about to sign them, and they seem to be comparing pens rather than nuclear weapons for once. Now, as it suggests, the strategic arms limitation talks were there to limit, not get rid of, but to limit some of the current nuclear weapons. So that includes anti-ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles. That's kind of good detail for B-grade students. It would be good if you're an A or an A-star candidate to learn some of the quotas of what they were reduced to. Find those in your booklet. What these talks didn't do, was restrict developing new nuclear weapons, and that's where critics saw these talks as limited, and that's why they ended up being called SALT 1 rather than just SALT, because they realised there was going to have to be a SALT 2 at some point to develop this further. Now this is information in purple for AA star candidates about some external problems going on at the time of the SALT 1 talks. At this time, the Yom Kippur War was going on, and this caused a bit of tension because basically in the Middle East, a war between Syria and Egypt versus Israel was going on, where the weapons were being supplied by the USSR and the USA respectively. So what I mean by that is Syria and Egypt were getting weapons from USSR and Israel were getting weapons from the USA. This didn't look very good. They were having an agreement about strategic arms limitation talks while supplying arms to other countries. So they had to kind of get this stopped, and eventually they agreed to let the UN intervene and end the war. So it's just a point to point out that the SALT 1 talks really had underlying tension behind them, and it showed that, perhaps that détente really wasn't going to last too long. And so the Apollo-Soyuz mission in 1975 perhaps was a bit of an exaggerated gesture to show cooperation between the USA and the USSR. Maybe it was there to overcompensate for the tension that was rattling behind these SALT 1 talks. But there they are, they're a joint mission into space, all about science and progress rather than about space race and arms race. And these kind of things were going to be brought up in the Helsinki agreements, which we're going to look at next. So after the Apollo-Soyuz mission, the Helsinki agreements were finally agreed on. They've been going on for a while, but they were agreed on in 1975. And this was basically a series of agreements about international issues that would help continue their relationship with each other peacefully. So these were all about issues that were likely to cause tension in the future, that had caused tension in the past, and they needed to make sure that these areas were addressed and not neglected. So the three areas, or as they were called baskets, were agreed upon. And here we are, some baskets. So area 1 was that of security. So what was meant by this is the USSR was to officially accept that West Germany was a country. So there would be no more USSR trying to invade West Germany or reunite Berlin. They would definitely accept that they were a separate country, and that area of tension, Germany and Berlin, would no longer be a problem. The second basket was that of cooperation, and as you saw by the Apollo-Soyuz mission, it was to do with making links through economic, cultural and scientific areas. So showing cooperation in these areas would hopefully also show cooperation in politics. And the third basket, which is the most important, is the human rights issue. So Helsinki begins with H, human rights begins with H, and this is the one, especially if you're going for a C grade, that you must remember. Helsinki, human rights. So what they agreed was that freedoms of speech, thought and religion should be maintained in all countries. And the USA really pushed for this one because they were concerned that this wasn't currently being shown in communist countries. And because the USA pushed for it, this caused a little bit of tension in détente. And this was particularly because Brezhnev didn't really like to be told how to run his country. And in fact, in the agreement itself, he made a speech actually saying, don't make any kind of suggestion on how to run internal affairs of any other country. He said no one should try to dictate to other peoples how they should manage their internal affairs. He really did feel a bit affronted by this, but essentially it was because he knew that there were some human rights issues going on. He had to agree to it though, because if he didn't, he would be humiliated in front of a worldwide stage. So we're nearly there. Number 3, the effects of détente. And with the mnemonic that Ali G has at the bottom, this is the cools down for a bit, but SALT 2 never reached by Christmas 79. Yes, it's that bad impression again. So those bits in red are the important bits for the effects of détente. First effect is that the relationship between the two superpowers, although still quite rocky, had cooled down for a while with signs of optimism. So it's generally saying that things have improved. A second effect of détente was that further talks were prepared, i.e. SALT II, which planned to limit strategic nuclear delivery vehicles and systems. Now in purple is an AA star thing to remember. These were called MIRVs, or Multiple Independently Targeted Re-entry Vehicles. It also was prepared to limit new strategic offensive weapons and for the first time ever actually ban something, which was construction of new launchers. So SALT II was building upon and adding to SALT I. So this looked very positive, but unfortunately the US Senate stopped this agreement being ratified, which means officially made into law. It stopped it because it heard that the USSR had invaded Afghanistan on Christmas Day of 1979. And this is what we'll look at in the next bit of revision, but the thing for you to remember is SALT II never happened. And now for a musical recap. We're going to listen to Give Peace a Chance, which I thought would be quite appropriate as you think about détente or peace.
2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody's talking about baggism, shaggism, baggism, maddism, raggism, taggism, thisism, thatism, isn't it the most? All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Yeah. Hey, come on. Everybody's talking about ministers, sinisters, banisters and canisters, bishops and rabbis and Popeyes and bye-byes and bye-byes. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Yeah, come on, all together. Let's sing. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Let me tell you now, everybody's talking about revolution, evolution, mastigation, flagellation, regulations, integrations, meditation, United Nations, congratulations. All we are saying, keep on, is give peace a chance. Let's hear it from the West Coast. All we are saying, come on, is give peace a chance. Yeah. All right. No, everybody's talking about John and Yoko, Jimmy Leary, Rosemary, Tommy Smothers, Bobby Dylan, Tommy Cooper, Derek Taylor, Norma Mailer, Alan Ginsberg, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. All we are saying, come on. You're all Beatles now. Give peace a chance. All right, yeah. All we are saying, come on, is give peace a chance. Let's hear it one more time. All we are saying, all right, is give peace a chance. Yeah. All right, everybody. All we are saying.
So we've got Ali G to help us with this détente, and get ready for a really bad accent. Here we go. USA and USSR become familiar. Nuclear hot ash cools down for a bit, but SALT II never reached by Christmas 79. Yes, I told you it was going to be bad. It was almost going Cockney. Anyway, the point of this is it contains, if you learn it, mnemonics and ideas linked to the issue of détente. And how we've split this up below, you can see, is into causes, features and effects, so into 3 sections, and that's how I'm going to go through it with you, and you'll be able to see how the bits in red of the whole mnemonic link and what they actually mean. So if you learn what Ali G says, you'll be okay. So well done, and I hope you enjoyed the song. Now on to a bit of exam practice. Two markers here, and remember two marker is simply a developed statement, so you need to be able to explain something relevant to what it's asking. So, the first 2 marker, describe one decision made about nuclear weapons in the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, or SALT I of 1972. If you remember, the key word there is limitation, so that should ring some bells. You talk about the fact that it's been limitation of certain nuclear weapons. You can choose which one you want to talk about. The anti-ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine launched ballistic missiles, maybe choose one that you can say. And the fact that they were not banned, but they were limited. That's all you need for 2 marks. Describe one decision made about human rights in the Helsinki agreements. Well, human rights, remember, it's freedoms of speech, thought, religion that has to be guaranteed. And then you could develop the statement by talking about the fact Brezhnev wasn't happy about being told what to do. Okay, here are the 2 marker exam practice questions. I think you should pause and have a go at one of them, or both. Next, 6 markers. So first, briefly explain the key features of détente in the years 72 to 75. So you just remember Ali G, and in particular you want the key features, so it's the middle bit, the nuclear hot ash. So what does that stand for again? Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, reducing the threat of war. The hotline, the Outer Space Treaty, the Test Ban Treaty, all reducing the threat of war as well. So that would be the second paragraph. And the third paragraph, the Apollo-Soyuz mission, SALT I and Helsinki agreements, all of which were increasing cooperation. And I'm sure you could say something about all 3 of those. The other 6 marker, briefly explain the key features of the Helsinki agreements. This time you've got one thing that you talked about in only 1 paragraph, you've got to take up 3 paragraphs. So what should those 3 paragraphs be about? Well, you could start off by explaining that the aim of the Helsinki agreements was to agree on international issues to avoid tension and to continue peacefully. And then your 3 paragraphs surely could be on the 3 baskets or areas of cooperation. Cooperation is one of those 3 baskets. So security, remember about the USSR, being mindful that West Germany exists and not trying to interfere with borders, cooperation in the areas of culture, science and economy, hopefully translating into political cooperation, and the most important of all, human rights issues. Remember the rights in the areas of freedoms of speech, religion and thought, and the fact that Brezhnev wasn't happy about it. You've got loads to write about. In which case, choose a 6 marker, pause the presentation and have a go, because there's nothing better than having a go at exam practice. Oh, and just don't forget to award yourself. Maybe it's going to be a song, maybe it's going to be a stroll down the garden or outside your house, maybe it's going to be a bit of chocolate, maybe it's going to be a run. Whatever it's going to be, make sure it happens after you've finished and look forward to it. Bye!